Welcome back, YouTube. 4 acres in a farmhouse, and today it is October 1st. I'm going to show you what I do to get our boiler ready for heating season. This is our hot water boiler. We've got radiators all through the house, small baseboard radiators. And every year this time of year, I come down and I'll clean it up, make sure everything looks good and is in operating condition for the winter ahead. So I installed this probably about 5 years ago. As you can see, it is a New Yorker. And I'm just going to run through what I usually do to get it ready for winter. There's really not a whole lot to do, but there's some simple things to make sure that it's going to operate the way it should. So just a real quick run through. Right there, you've got your circuit board. Your ignition control is what I call it. The thermistor right down there, right there. That's going to be a rollout switch. So if your burners ever get dirty or if there's a delayed ignition, that thermistor will pop and shut everything down so there's not a fire or anything like that. So you got your series of burners here, and where that green wire leads, that is your pilot. So I'll pull these burners out and pull the pilot out and show you how to clean that stuff. Here we've got our draft hood. This will bring in air. There's a damper on this model. There's a damper right there. When the thermostat calls for heat, that will initiate and open up, and when it's all the way open at 90 degrees, you'll hear a click and it'll tell the ignition control that the damper's open. We've got a draft, and it'll go ahead and light the pilot. Once the pilot is proven, it'll send a DC millivolt current back to that board, and the gas valve will open up and the burners will light. Once the burners light, it'll heat the water that is being pumped through by our pump here, and it'll reach a temperature of around 180, 185, something like that. I can't remember exactly what I've got it set at. Typically on a residential system, 180 to 190 or so on your water temp. Once that water temp reaches your 180, 190, whatever your setting is, the burners will shut off. And if your thermostat's still calling for heat, the pump will continue to circulate water through the house until the thermostat's satisfied. If the thermostat does not satisfy and we still need heat, the water coming back to the boiler will continue to give up its heat to the house till it reaches maybe, I don't know, 165, 160 maybe. And it'll bring your burners back on and keep heating the water. So it's just a cycle that happens to heat the water and keep things warm upstairs. So here we have a fill valve. This will introduce water to the boiler if we lose some water. Anytime you add water to the system, you're naturally going to add some air bubbles. So we've got what's called an automatic air bleeder right there. And so it's right next to the fill valve. The water comes through here, goes up, hits that air bleeder, and we relieve the air. And then it just starts going through the system. So the other thing you want to notice here is that arrow right there. There's an arrow right there. And it is pointing this way. or to your right. You never want to add cold water to a hot boiler. So the water coming through the fill valve is going to hit this air bleeder and start going that way, not back towards the boiler. You want it to go this way because you don't want to add cold water to a boiler. So the cold water will be added to the system and just mixed in should it ever need water. You shouldn't need a lot of water. If you're adding water all the time, you got a leak somewhere. So I also have two zones. I've got a zone system here. It's a Takeo zone system for upstairs and downstairs. So we got a thermostat downstairs, I got a thermostat upstairs. Each thermostat will initiate a call for heat for the boiler to run. We tend to have the upstairs a little colder in the winter than the downstairs. Plus heat rises, so you want to keep your downstairs a little warmer, and that heat will rise to the upstairs and help keep it warm. What we used to have was just one thermostat downstairs, and whenever the heat was on, we smothered upstairs. It was too much. This here is an expansion tank, just like this is an expansion tank for the water system in your house. This is an expansion tank for the boiler. It just provides some pushback on the pressure to help get the water through the house, keep it moving, and not solely rely on the pump. So I've got a series of valves here to valve off and isolate the upstairs and the downstairs. So from time to time, again, you may get air in the system, and this air bleeder here, the purge, is not going to catch every bubble. We hope it does, but maybe it doesn't. And you get some air in the lines that are eventually going to travel through the system and possibly go upstairs or whatever. You've got to bleed that air off. There are bleed needles upstairs in the registers that I can bleed individual registers from, or I can isolate the upstairs and hook a hose right here to this boiler drain and literally feed water through it and push the air out of the system. And I know it sounds kind of counterproductive what I said earlier. If you're trying to get air out, you're introducing air if you're adding water, but sometimes the air is hard to get out. It can be a real bear to get the air out sometimes. So by forcing it out with water, you kind of free it up. It doesn't get trapped. So anyway, water comes in, goes to the system. This is my downstairs run. This is my upstairs run, and this is my return back. So I return here. I return here from the upstairs, and I return here from the downstairs, which tie in here and go back down to my pump into the boiler to be reheated. After it's heated, it comes out, travels this way, and then just repeats the process. So in a nutshell, that is my hot water boiler. I guess a couple other things we want to talk about is your pressure gauge. My pressure right now is a little high. Not super concerned, but it is a little high. So I haven't had my boiler on yet, so the water is cold, but the pressure is reading around 25 psi, which on a cold boiler, it's creeping. It's sitting at 30. I don't know. We'll see. My pressure relief back here is set at 30 psi, so that's getting a little concerning. What I would do to alleviate that is possibly adjust my fill valve a little bit and just make sure that my pressure doesn't get up too high. I'd like to see it really in the 20-pound range, 18 to 20 pounds. That's really, I think, all I need. But if it gets up over 30, I'm gonna start seeing water come out my relief there, and I don't want that. I'll start taking it apart here and show you what I do to clean it up and make sure we're ready for winter. So the first thing I'm gonna do is turn the power off to it. So I'll move that screw right there. And then these burners will just pull out like this. When natural gas burns, it creates carbon monoxide and it creates water vapor. If you've got a gas furnace or a boiler like this, no matter what it is, you're creating water vapor when it burns. So you're gonna get rust. It's just the nature of the beast. So I'll pull each one of these out and we'll brush them off and dump any little rust flakes out, clean them up, make sure everything's good. There's no real rhyme or reason how these go in. The only one that's important is where your pilot is. So, and it says right here, pilot burner must be located here. So that's the important one. The rest of them, they can go back in however. So one thing I'll do is take a 7/16 opened end. I'll take this pilot tube off. Probably not a bad idea to shut your gas off. This thing, I've got the power off. It's not going to fire, so it's fine. And I'll hook my pilot. This green wire is a ground. And it is necessary that be on there or the flame sensor is not going to read right. So you've got a flame sensor on your pilot. So this flame sensor right here will detect the flame. Once the pilot is on, it'll heat that little flame sensor up right there. And it'll tell the circuit board that we've got a good flame. Once we got the flame is proven on the pilot, then, like I said, the gas valve will open up and the burners will light. So that has to be clean. I'll just get a little piece of sandpaper or something and we'll clean that up. And I'll take these out and get a wire brush and we'll clean those up and blow them out with an air hose or something. There's an orifice in there that you want to make sure is clean. I can't remember if this thing comes out real easy or not. Thing I can do is shine my light down here and look through that hole and see that it's clear. So if you look through this hole, right there, you can see it. There's a small orifice for your pilot. And that looks pretty clean. So if I couldn't see my light through there, I'd have to get something and clean that out. The other thing I'll show you is down in here. So this is basically your combustion chamber. And this is where the burners burn. They burn up through the cast iron that has the water in it, where the water's flowing through. That cast iron gets pretty hot, heats the water, and you have your heat. And all the carbon dioxide and moisture just go right up through in and out the flue. All right, so I'm just gonna take a wire brush like this. And just make sure see all the rust I got out. But all those little holes is where the gas comes out and burns. So they get just, I don't know, crumbs of rust in them, and you want to make sure all that's out of there so you get a good clean burn and no problems. Probably blow them out with air when I'm done too, just as a double check. Insurance, make sure all the stuff's out of them. The other thing that might happen really is when it sits all summer not being used, spiders and bugs crawl up in there, and I pulled these things out before and seen spider nests in there. So I want to make sure that stuff's out of there. You need to have your furnace checked before every season by a professional. I used to do this work for a living. I don't anymore, but I used to do it, and so I know what I'm doing, or at least I'll pretend I do. Well, I tell you, I don't need this heat right now. It is burning up where I live. The humidity is off the chart right now. So I just showed in here in the combustion chamber that rust and stuff. I get a shop vac, sweep that all out. So one of the last things I'm gonna do, like I said, is just take a small piece of sandpaper and just real gently clean up that flame sensor. Most people have gas furnaces, forced air. I mean, a lot of people are gonna have heat pumps maybe, but those of you with gas furnaces, which are probably a lot of people in the Midwest, they have what are called hot surface ignition or hot surface igniters on their furnace. Years ago, you'd have a standing pilot. Those are gone now for the most part. It would be really rare to see a furnace with a standing pilot on it nowadays, where the pilot just burns all the time. And you had an old thermocouple. They still are in water heaters, but not so much on furnaces. So most furnaces everybody's went to the high efficiency or higher efficiency, trying to save on fuel costs, which I get. But they've added a whole lot of bells and whistles to the furnaces that aren't always wonderful, put it that way. But most of you have a furnace that has a hot surface igniter on it. So if you've ever watched your furnace fire, when it calls for heat, you have a draft inducer motor and it'll come on and it'll prove the draft. So to make sure your flue's not plugged up, to make sure the draft inducer is working correctly. And it's doing two things. The draft inducer on your furnace, it's pulling air through the combustion chamber and it's pushing the exhaust fumes out. If there's a blockage of any kind, ice, maybe a bird gets in your flue, whatever it is, you've got a pressure switch that will not make, and nothing will happen. So you'll see your hot surface igniter glow orange, and then it won't light. It'll do that typically 3 times, and then it'll lock out, and you'll have to reset it and try it again. But if you have to reset it, then there's a problem. So again, this is a forced air gas furnace. You'll hear the inducer motor come on. It'll run through all its safeties and make sure everything's good. And then you'll see that hot surface igniter glow orange. And then you'll hear your gas valve click and your burners will ignite. And on those furnaces too, you've got a flame sensor that detects that flame on those burners. And it's doing that to make sure, it's to prove that the burners are burning and we're not just dumping gas in there unignited. So if it doesn't see a flame, it'll shut everything down. But again, just like on my pilot here, I've got a flame sensor. If you've got a forced air gas furnace, it'll have a flame sensor and it's got to be clean. So that's one of the main things you want to have somebody come out and clean and look for, so you don't get a no heat in the middle of winter. All right, so let's start putting this thing back together. So the first thing I'm going to do is reconnect my pilot tube. And you shouldn't have to, if you take this apart, everything should go back pretty much the same. You don't want to go bending your pilot tubing and messing around with it too much. Everything should fit right back the way it was. Everything should fit back up pretty easily. What you don't want to do when you're doing stuff like this is force things. You never want to force things in, and you don't have to be so gentle, you know, but everything should pretty much go in fairly easy. You want to be careful when you're threading in. For instance, this pilot tubing, it's all hand tight. If you got to take a wrench and do anything other than just give it one final tightening, you've done something wrong. You don't want to do that because you'll strip the gas valve out and then you got to have a gas valve. So that's where my pilot's going to go. So I'm going to put that on my pliers on there and give this a little tighten. Again, you don't have to get too crazy. You've got slots back at the back of the heat exchanger where these burners ride on. So that's, you got to make sure those go back in those slots. But that's not a big deal. And then we'll get our ground back hooked up. They make it pretty simple for you nowadays. Just like the pilot, it's got a little knurl right there, which fits right back in place. I remember years ago trying to do that. They didn't have that. And you had to try to line the pilot up, and sometimes it could be a real nightmare. And then you just start putting your burners back in. So you gotta look for the slot back there. There's really no way you can do it wrong. Well, I suppose there is a way you could do it wrong, but see how good I am with my left hand. Alright, all the burners are back in, and we'll pop our rollout plate back into where it goes. Put that screw back in. Make sure my pilot tube is tight at my gas valve, which that is. Okay. So one more quick run through. Pilot's tight, I know that. Burners are in. Rollout plate is back in position. I got my pilot tube back up here, tight. I can go ahead and turn my gas on. One last thing I like to do is I like to just wipe it down, make sure it stays clean and nice. I don't know, I'm a big proponent of take care of your stuff and your stuff will take care of you. So I just wipe the mud and junk from the summertime that's got on it from whatever reason. Bugs and dust. So another thing that I like to do is I'll come over and just like on your water heater, it's a good idea. Let a little water out. That'll also let me see, it'll take some pressure off the boiler and see if the fill valve is gonna bring it back up, which it did. So typically I wouldn't make an adjustment on my fill valve, but I'm going to. I let some water out of the boiler to see how it would fill back up, where my pressure landed, and it's on about 25 psi cold, which is too high. So I'm gonna back this off a little bit and see what happens. So I'm at 25 right now. A little more water out. Okay. I'm hearing water run, but it's their dishwasher. Okay, so now it's landing at about 22. So it's working. So, boy, that might be all the adjustment I got. Nope. So that's about 19 psi cold, which is, now I'll tell you what, I want to see 18, so I'm going to go another quarter turn and lock that down. I feel better about that. That ought to be good. We'll see what happens. All right, well, I think now I'm ready to fire it. I'll turn the thermostat on. We'll watch it burn. Okay, it just moved. Okay. All right. So Kristen just turned the thermostat on upstairs. The pump's running. And you can see the state changed on the ignition control. 18, waiting for damper to open is what it says. So our damper is opening. And you can see right here, this is turning. So our pilot is trying to light. And there she goes. So we are heating. That was a nice smooth ignition. And flame looks good. You want a nice blue flame. Everything looks good. There's no air adjustments on these burners. A lot of burners will have, well, I guess you can adjust the air on them, but there's no, these are, I take that back. These are set burners. There's no air adjustments. So what it is what it is. On a lot of older gas furnaces and stuff, you can adjust the air on the burner, the intake air of the burner to, so you can set your combustion. You don't want to see any yellow tips on the end of your flame, because that indicates soot. You just want a nice crisp blue flame. So you're going to get some color. See that in there? You can see some orange jumping every now and then. That's just dust burning. That's not a big deal. Dust in the air is traveling through there, and it burns and ignites and turns orange and yellow. But so we'll come over here. So we're already up to 21 on my gauge. We'll keep an eye on that. And I'll start to feel. I mean, we're getting warm already. So that fast. This pipe's getting hot right now. So the main thing is coming back to the boiler. So this is your return. Once this starts heating up, you know you're getting good heat through the house. So that's I'm not real worried about it. I'm pretty sure everything's going to be flowing fine and is going to heat fine. So it is cobweb city down here. So there's my return line there. It's starting to get heat on it already. So all that water's traveling through the downstairs, and we're getting warm water back already. So everything's moving fine. Here's the line back from the house. You can hear it. You can hear the water moving through it. So I think we're good to go. Now I'm gonna have her kill the downstairs thermostat and watch it shut off, and then I'll have her go upstairs and turn that one up and make sure the upstairs thermostat fires the boiler. So I'll be back in just a sec. All right, so Kristen's on her way upstairs to turn the thermostat up in the bedroom. And again, that thing on that damper is horizontal right now. When she on a call for heat from the upstairs thermostat, I just heard it. So that'll start turning. My pump just came on. My damper's moving. See our pilot light, and then we'll have ignition. I think we're good to go. Let that run a minute, and I think we're ready for winter. So as a bit of a disclaimer, I wanted to just tell everybody, I used to do this work about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I did heating and cooling and refrigeration work. That's my trade. I no longer do it. I've kind of changed careers. But I still have the knowledge. I still do it for family and friends. And of course, I do it for myself because I can, and I know what I'm doing with it. So don't do this yourself. Have a professional come do it. But you need to have it done every year, especially your heat. You can live a little while without air conditioning. You can't live very long without your heat. So it's important that you have these things checked out. For the carbon monoxide, you want to make sure everything's sound in your heat exchanger, and in your flue system, so there's no threat of carbon monoxide in your house. And you just want to ensure that your family's safe for the winter. So it's always a good idea to come down here in the fall and make sure everything's running right and working good. So have a professional take care of you, and your equipment will last and take care of you for many years. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.